Marketing can be a nightmare, right? Well, it's actually easier than you think. So we brought in the master of marketing, the king of culture, and the baron of branding himself, Mark Fisher, to prove it. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Naamly's YouTube channel. I'm always so excited to speak to industry legends, and you were one that I was super excited to talk to. And I thought about why, of course, what is an outside reason that I'm always excited to talk to Mark? And I figured it out. I feel like you always bring this sort of like first date energy to a conversation. You ask like questions that you want to find out about me and how things are going. You want me to learn about you. And it's really about making this personal connection every time we talk. And I feel like you lead with that every single time we get together and have a conversation. So thanks so much for joining us, man.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for the compliment. I will resist the desire to make all number of inappropriate off-color jokes.
I'm gonna try not to set you up too much. So for today's video, I really want to take a moment to get into your head about marketing and branding. You really have this remarkable reputation as being really a king of culture, and directly related to that, branding and marketing. You really see a lot of gyms operate like the Wizard of Oz, where you've got this front of how things are, and then things are a little bit different behind the curtain. And I feel like with you and Mark Fisher Fitness, not only did you guys pull back the curtain, like you removed the curtain entirely. Everybody kind of
Yes.
gets to see everything.
It's
So
naked.
when you founded Mark Fisher Fitness, did you set out with that intent, or was it cultivated over time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I just don't think I knew any different. And because my background was in the arts, and because particularly in the beginning, in many ways, and I might say still to some extent we're doing this, it was about leveraging and operationalizing my eccentricities. It always made sense to bring the full me into the game. Quite frankly, I haven't historically had a lot of success in putting a limit on the full me, which was a source of no shortage of sadness in middle school, but ultimately it's worked out good. So yeah, I guess I haven't really like thought about it one way or the other. I'll say this. One advantage that I do think I had when Mark Fisher Fitness started is like, it feels to me I was at a very good age for what I did, because I was old enough that I was ready to, I knew some things about the world,
Mhm.
and I was comfortable with who I was, but I was still young enough that I was like, whatever. Like there was really nothing to lose at that point in my life. So yeah, I'm very aware it is an unusual brand. I do think it's pretty consistent, and I do think we're pretty transparent. I think we've always strived to do that. Do we do it perfectly? I don't know. I mean, maybe other people are probably best to judge that, but I do think I've certainly tried to be a consistent, the real true version of me in any either marketing materials or off. My favorite thing to hear is when someone meets me in life. They're like, "Oh, you're who?" Oh, somebody said this recently. It was the nicest comment I ever heard. They said, "You're exactly who I was hoping you were going to be." I was like, "Oh,
Oh, what
wow,
a compliment.
that's the
Wow.
nicest thing somebody could say." I
Yeah.
was like, "Really? Oh, that goes to my warm fuzzy file. That felt very good to hear." Um, and yeah, and I think the gym's brand is an extension of that. It's, and being transparent, it's an interesting moment for us because I'm not as involved operationally. So we're having some conversations internally about what does this mean to reflect, a business that of course is very different, in 2024 from a business
Mhm.
that was founded in 2011. My role in relationship with the business, while still important, has taken on something of a fairy grandfather. And I think we're sort of figuring out together, okay, like what is the next version of this? Not to suggest it's necessarily going to be that dramatic. I'm probably overselling it. But in practice, yeah, we want to stay in integrity. We want to stay reflective of who this business is, of who these people are, and make sure, getting into both culture and brand, that if there's necessary in some situations, maybe there's an update coming of some of the values, even the way the business is positioned. And yeah, we're sort of in talks about that right now. So it's a both challenging things in some ways, but also kind of exciting to be, continue the work of evolution and artistic creation.
I like that. I think evolution is the key word there, and being willing to move as the market moves, as the world moves. And I think that sometimes people get stuck in authenticity, thinking, okay, I've hit it. I'm authentic, right?
Yeah.
Rather than it being a forever pursuit, because the version
Yeah.
of you, the
Yeah.
version of your business, everything changes over time. So to
So
stay
true.
authentic, you have to continue to pursue it. And I
Yeah.
really love that sort of mindset. And I have a follow-up question when it comes to that mindset. One of the common issues I run into as a sales coach is that the struggle where gym owners want to serve everybody. And
Yeah.
I don't mean it in an exclusive way. If somebody shows up
Mhm.
on the doors and like, hey, I want to train, of course the answer is going to be an emphatic, yeah, come on in, let's work out. But at the same time, How do you approach that mindset of we really have to get our brand focused, our marketing focused, our target demographic focused? What is the mindset behind that, especially when you
Mm.
have when gym owners have such a big heart, they want to serve everybody they possibly can?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. One of my mentors said something once that I think encapsulates what I've tried to do. And certainly with this in mind, I think I do it even more intentionally, which is that your marketing will help more people than your business ever will.
Hmm,
Which is to say that if you are actually putting out valuable content that is helpful to people, that they enjoy, that, I often think of good value building content as giving education, entertainment, and energy, right? You're motivating, and that can be done a lot of different ways. That can be done through humor, through inspiration, through telling client case stories. But when you think about content marketing, which for most gyms is the way that you build the relationship over time, right? Because once people know that you exist, that's the first step. But over time, they need to come to like and trust you in most cases before they hire you. And
hmm,
I would note, frankly, even once they've hired you, it's an underrated retention tool to
hmm.
continue to speak to your audience and give them valuable, helpful information that's going to help solve the problems they're having and answer the questions they're running into. So when I think about that challenge, which I very much have struggled with a little bit, I think partly because I don't come from a background with a lot of money. I think a lot of the industry is going very up market right now. People are moving away from
Yeah,
large group classes. And, that's sort of the cliche business trick is just charge everybody a lot more. And I think overall, listen, you can't be the best and be the cheapest, which I think I heard actually from Alan Cosgrove was the very first time I heard that. On the one hand, you can't be the best and be the cheapest, and you deserve to get paid. And it is also true if you're like me and you got a bleeding heart, it doesn't feel good that you can't necessarily help everybody. So my
right.
suggestion is get great at marketing,
Hmm.
get amazing at marketing. And if you're truly proficient at putting out valuable content, you then have leverage. So there's ways you can provide resources, you can provide blogs, videos, podcasts, whatever your channels are. And it's maybe a different conversation around what is more effective or less effective for gyms. But ultimately, your marketing can help a lot of these people. And that way, you can, I think, fairly make the claim that, look, to get the substantive type of transformative work that we're capable to do in the gym, it's going to be this kind of investment, this kind of commitment. And if you're not in a position to do that, that's absolutely no worries. Here's zillions of other free resources, blogs, things that can help you get these types of results on your own. And that I think is how I think about that in a way that makes me feel good about sleeping at night and allow me to run a business that can be the best that I know how to make it.
That gives me the perfect opportunity to bring up your book when you talk about just getting really good at marketing. Because if you there's I mean an infinite number of people out there that truly need fitness help, and you're
Yeah.
never going to have the capability to
Yes.
serve everyone.
Yes.
You
No.
might as well serve the people that resonate with you best to the very
Yep.
best of your ability.
Yep.
And in your like,
Yep.
it shows up in your book, and I would say my favorite part about your book is that it's structured almost like a checklist. Like if you do this in order, it's like you
Yeah.
could hand it to someone and say, "Here, do that," and this
Yep.
will bring them 90% of the way to excellence. So can you
Yep.
tell us what you set out to accomplish with the little book of gym marketing?
Yeah. So I wanted to make a model that would reflect the current way that I'm thinking about this. So between running Mark Fisher Fitness and owning a gym in New Jersey that's a franchise brand and coaching a bunch of gym owners and particularly taking a bunch of them through a marketing sprint of late,
Mhm.
I've had the opportunity to continue to refine how I think about this because even though the methods of the various things you can do to market your gym can vary, there's two things. Number one, there's not an infinite number of them, right? Because if you have a geographic constrained business, there's really actually not an unlimited number of things you can do that can drive more leads and
Yeah.
drive more clients. It is also true that even though some of those techniques and methods will vary from different markets, some things, frankly, are more or less effective, right? Because there's a lot of things that, I'll give a tease. There's some things in there I talk about that I'm pretty candid. It's like, you could do this, and like, this is probably not a good use of your time. But the methods, the principles don't change. It's always going to be you need some set of tools or foundations, right? You're going to need an offer. You're going to need clarity on who you're serving. You're going to need a website that works well. Then you're going to need strategies that help people know you exist, that go from I've never heard of you to they somehow strike upon you, right? And there's a lot of different ways you could do that. Then you need systems that so people come to like and trust you over time. So we were just talking about content marketing is one of the more effective ways of doing this. And then you need some strategies where once people raise their hand, usually in response to an offer you've made, how do you convert them? Right. So what is your follow-up like? What does your sales conversations look like? And then finally, at the very end, I map on, I think, a little bit of time management because I can't help myself. And in practice, time is how these things get done. So I do think there's something to be said for once you have laid out all these pieces in this buffet menu, you have to start to understand, okay, well, what am I doing each day and each week over time? And then to some extent, also, how am I thinking on a monthly basis for something called the marketing calendar, which always sounds very complicated, but it's really nothing more than thinking about, okay, what are the external messaging I'm doing to the various subsets of my audience in a given month for over the next few months? So that model, I think, is really what you need to think through when you're trying to troubleshoot if you're not having the number of leads you want. And honestly, like most people want more leads, right? There's at the end of the day, it is a little bit of a volume game. All things being equal,
Sure.
more leads is usually going to lead to a better business. I think the final thing I will share is a little caveat to this, and this is reflected actually in a updated disclaimer that I wrote actually after the book was already live for a week or two after having some conversations with people, is you can't do all the things. So that's, I think, the strength and the potential pitfall of this book if you're not careful. You can't do all the things. This is literally a list of everything you could possibly do. It's functioning, as you said, like a how high-powered checklist, but ultimately, time is a constraint. And in fact, you wouldn't be able to do all the things in this book unless you maybe had 3 or 4 full-time salespeople. And that's not going to work for the margins of most independent gyms, to say the very least. So you do want to use this book to review the things you're doing. It's a great idea to consider, is there anything else you want to integrate? But I would really encourage you, instead of trying to do everything, really dial in on what are the handful of things from each of those categories you're going to go in on hardcore. And importantly, when they start to work, in most situations, and hats off to my friend John Franklin, who mentions it's so true. A lot of gym owners would be like, okay, cool. Great. I was doing, this particular thing. I was doing like a live event, let's say, right? It worked. We got leads. That was amazing. All right, let's do something else. No, whatever the thing is that's working, keep doing more of the thing that's working.
Yeah.
And if it stopped, and I understand part of our job, of course, is the test, but ultimately, yeah, pick a handful of things, go all in on them. And then if they're working, keep doing those things over and over and just don't get bored of them. Keep doing them
I'm
forever.
such a huge fan of that because I get asked this question a lot. Hey, we did this thing and it resulted in a whole bunch of leads. What would you change? And my answer is like, what,
Yeah.
what would I change? Not, I would change how many times you did that. And I would do that more times.
Yeah.
That's the one change I have for you is increase the frequency of that thing that's already
Yep.
working. That's
Yep. Do
awesome.
the
It's
boring
funny you
work.
bring up the marketing calendar because the one thing that I like, I won't waste the time of sharing my screen, but the notes I'm looking at right now specifically have targeted that unique piece that stuck out to me was the idea of a weekly marketing schedule, right? Because gym owners
Yep.
don't think of scheduling your marketing. I'm a big
Yeah.
believer of what gets scheduled gets done.
Yep. Yep.
And it's so simple. It's so
Yep.
simple and uncomplicated, but sometimes you need somebody to hold your face and tell you, no, just look at this one thing right here.
Yeah.
It's right here. I got you. It's so simple because it's so easy to overthink it because we're
Yep.
bombarded with information and ideas and gurus and all
Yep.
sorts of stuff like that.
Totally.
You know, I think 53 pages is your book, and it needs to be exactly 53 pages, and that's what I love
Yeah.
about it. I think
Totally.
it's perfect.
Listen, it's a less than a 30-minute read.
Mhm.
No, full disclosure is maybe deciding what to do and really how to nail every single one of those things is obviously beyond the scope of that little book. But if you want to take a broad overview of a comprehensive guide of all the things that you could possibly do, get more leads and more clients, it's in this book. And then to your excellent point, you then want to operationalize it, right? You need to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do today, this week? How do I get that scheduled? Because if I can offer one of the things that I see go awry a lot is the first stage of a typical gym owner marketing problem is they're not doing anything. The first stage is I opened up. If I build it, they will come. I hope to get referrals. And most people see very quickly, except for some very unusual circumstances, that doesn't work. So then they start doing some marketing. But the problem is they're not doing things very consistently. They're not disciplined about doing it because if you have a client, let's say scheduled at 9 o'clock a.m., you're not going to not go to that client, right? So training clients is easy because there's built-in accountability. And what a lot of gym owners would benefit from is creating whatever is realistic for them. And I realize time is the constraint, but I'll tell you what, if you do 5 dedicated hours on lead generation and lead nurture, lead conversion techniques, week in, week out over time, that's really going to start to compound. And if you have the bandwidth and the interest to push it up a little bit higher, you will tend to get better results because at some level it is a volume game. So I think if there's one thing that I would want everyone in the world to take away from this book when they review it, is it might actually be that final piece, right? It's like, how do you actually do things week over week over week? Because otherwise it really runs the risk of being more fun facts and interesting theory. But I think, as we know, as gym owners, it's the equivalent of the client that's always going from program to program, but they're not really doing the program full out over a long enough period to actually get the results. And you'd be better probably reading less about training and just hiring a coach and just training hard, even on a program, frankly, that's not even that great, but
Yeah.
a not perfectly designed program done with savage commitment day in and day out is always going to beat the most brilliant program that's just this theory in your head, and that, frankly, you're only going to be thinking about a little while before you flip to the next one.
I think that's the perfect note to end on, is whatever parts of this that you decide to do, go all in on those things. And I love that. Go in on all out. And it's hilarious advice because it is the exact same as training. The mindset is the
Yeah,
exact same
it's
as
the same
training.
thing. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the same thing.
exactly.
It's turtles all the
Consistency
way
over
down.
time. I
Yeah.
think consistency over time matched with your intensity is really what's going to yield those results. So before we go, can you tell us where we can spend more time with you when you're not around? Where do we go to
Yep.
find more Mark Fisher Fitness, more business for unicorns? Where do we go?
Yeah, the best place to find us these days is probably on Instagram. So you can go to @Business for Unicorns and follow us there. We're pretty active on there, putting out some content. The other thing that people really are interested in what I get up to is I love writing emails. I put a lot of care and thought into sharing information that I hope is valuable. On the one hand, hopefully this will model perhaps some of what you might want to consider for your gym, but it's also my love letter to you. It's one of the ways I like to make art in the world. So the best way to get on that list would be it's probably also linked in the show notes, but you
Mhm.
can go to gymmarketingsecretsbook.com. Again, that's gymmarketingsecretsbook.com, or you can click the show note. And when you go there, you'll get instant access to this book we've been talking about. I think you'll find it valuable. It's less than a 30-minute read. And of course, because I will model the behaviors I suggest for you, you'll then start to hear from me via emails, which I do think you'll find valuable. If you run a gym and you're looking for more income, more impact, and more freedom, I think you'll find a lot to take away and take action on from those emails.
Mark, thank you so much, man. I can't wait for the next time we get to hang out.
A true pleasure.
Hey, gang, for all of you that tuned in today to this specific episode, we've got something special for you. Naamly has partnered with Mark Fisher to bring you his brand new book, absolutely free. So click the link below to get his book. And if you're new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and smash that bell for alerts. We'll see you next week.